Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. As part of our coverage of ATX Television Festival Season 8, I was lucky enough to chat with the legendary George Takei. Most of us know him as Sulu from Star Trek, or maybe you remember him more recently from Heroes or Fresh Off the Boat. But in our interview, we discuss his role as consultant and actor on the upcoming series The Terror. Season 2 is titled Infamy, and follows a ghost story through a Japanese-American internment camp inside the United States during World War II. It's a great chat, and if you're like me, you can listen to his voice for hours. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much for your time. I was telling Alex I love anthology shows and was thrilled when I heard what the storyline would be for this season of The Terror. I don't find it to be an area of history that's mined very much for story, and I'm a little baffled as to why. So I was happy to see both what subject matter with the internment camps, and then also bringing you on as consultant, and then also in it. Can you talk a bit about coming aboard the project, what you thought when you first saw it, what form was it in when you first saw it?
Well, Alex brought me on initially as a consultant, and so I worked with the writing team and took them to the Japanese American National Museum, which we founded, to institutionalize that story. It's been my mission in life to raise the awareness of this chapter of American history. This is American history, and it's too little known, as you indicated. I'm always shocked when I talk to people that I consider well-informed, well-read people about my childhood imprisonment, and they are even more shocked and aghast that such a thing happened in the United States. And this chapter, I think, is an important chapter of our democracy, because we learn from the chapters of our history where we faltered, where we failed its ideals, more than with the glorious chapters, because we get that regularly, and it's repeated time and again. D-Day again today, or Memorial Day, or 4th of July. But we learn more about our democracy and its fragility from the chapters where we made a mistake. And if we want to make our democracy a better democracy, a more just democracy, we need to know those times where we failed. And so it's been my mission in life to raise the awareness of this chapter, and that's why it's such a fulfillment for me to work on this project and to work in the early stages with the writers. Brought them to the museum, saw the artifacts, we walked them through the gallery that tells the internment story, and the symbolism of certain articles and so forth. And I shared with them the important key points, such as the loyalty questionnaire. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, this nation was stampeded by war hysteria and racism, because we were at war with Germany and Italy. But German Americans and Italian Americans weren't summarily rounded up as we Japanese Americans were, because they looked like the rest of America. It was clearly racism. And so these points were made to the writing staff. And then Alex said, "You're an actor. Would you like to be in it?" And I said, "That's who I am." And this is my story. And it's my passion to share this. And if you want me as a part of the Japanese American community that we dramatize, I'd be more than happy to be included.
when you found out about your role, did you have any particular? Did it change with your involvement as far as the actual part you played?
You mean from the consulting? No, that remained the same. In fact, I was on the set to tweak certain things, like in the mess hall, they had the cooks wearing these white caps that all restaurant workers wear. In camp, we did not have that. The cooks in our block at the mess hall were people who were not cooks. The people were just recruited, internees, and they had undershirts on and a white headband that they tied, and so those little details were what I helped make authentic on the set.
Was there any particular one thing that you were really glad that you helped them get right?
Well, I think it's the telling of the story, because there've been 3 or 4 movies on the internment, 3 or 4 episodes from various television series, but never has there been a story of the internment told on this scale, this massive scale. 10 episodes, 10 hours over a 10-week period, going into the entire internment experience, from before Pearl Harbor, the impact of Pearl Harbor on the Japanese American community, the anguish and the confusion and the chaos of evacuation itself. After a year of imprisonment, the U.S. government, in its chaos and disorder, decided to demand a loyalty questionnaire from the people that are, first we were impoverished. They took everything from us, and then they imprisoned us with no charges, no trial, and without due process. And then a year into imprisonment, they demand a loyalty questionnaire, because they've discovered that there's a wartime manpower shortage. And here are these young men primarily, but also young women, that they could have had, that they classified as enemy aliens. How to justify drafting them out of a barbed wire prison camp? And so they come down with this loyalty questionnaire, which was very sloppily, thoughtlessly, stupidly put together. There were 2 questions that turned all 10 camps into outrage and chaos. Question 27 asked, "Will you bear arms to defend the United States of America?" This being asked of my mother. When we went into camp, my baby sister was an infant. A year later, she's a toddler. I was 6 years old by that time. My brother was 5 years old. She was being asked to abandon her family and bear arms to defend the nation that's imprisoning her family. It was preposterous. Question 28, the following question, was one sentence with 2 conflicting ideas. It asked, "Will you swear your loyalty to the United States of America and forswear your loyalty to the Emperor of Japan?" The Emperor of Japan were Americans. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. My father was a San Franciscan. We didn't have to answer the loyalty questionnaire, but we were born in Los Angeles. And for the government to assume that we have an inborn racial loyalty to the emperor was insulting. So if you answered no, meaning I don't have a loyalty to the emperor to forswear, that no applied to the first part of the very same sentence. Will you swear your loyalty to the United States? It was a no-win question. And so my parents answered no to those 2 questions, and thus they were classified as disloyal, and we had to be transferred to the segregation camp for disloyals. And this became symbolically the most notorious and the biggest of all the internment camps. 18,000 people, where the Arkansas camp that we were originally incarcerated in was 6,000 people. Others at most were 11,000. This was 18,000 people incarcerated behind 3 layers of barbed wire fence and a half a dozen tanks patrolling.
Because your mom was so dangerous.
Yes. I mean, these are people, Americans that were goaded into outrage to answer no, and now, they're overreacting. Those tanks belong on a battlefield fighting the war, not guarding over innocent people. So, that kind of detail goes into this, not only the scope, but the detail, and the fusion of this historic chapter with the ancient Japanese literary form called kaidan of ghost tales. The internment was harrowing enough to be unjustly imprisoned and impoverished, and then the brutality that was inflicted on the people. That means, there were rotten apples in every group, and the guards were sometimes, neurotic, and so the historic tensions and anguish and the rage that the natural kind of emotions that existed in the internment camp is amplified and intensified by infusing the ghost element. Because people, marriages broke up, families were split up, brothers and sisters that separated, and so we just intensified that with the superstitious element.
Yeah, when I first heard what season 2 would be, I thought that's perfect, because that blanket fear of being in a house alone at night is what makes every creep into a ghost. It makes everything scary. And I cannot imagine a situation where every single person would be at such a low-grade fear all the time in the camp.
And being crushed together, crowded together in barracks, eating in the mess hall, 3 times a day, and the bad food that's being served, and the anger and the complaints that go on, all that leads to all kinds of tension and anger and frustration.
I would think it would also make you hyper aware of your heritage to be singled out for it so much.
Well, 2 unique reactions happened. When the loyalty questionnaire came down, some young men were so determined to prove their loyalty that they bit the bullet, swallowed the ugly taste, and answered the way the government wanted them to answer that, with yeses. And they were drafted out of a prison camp to serve in the military. In a segregated unit of Japanese Americans that were sent to the battlefields of Europe, used like cannon fodder. Wave after wave of young Japanese Americans, these strange phrase to use, but banzai charges, and yet they fought with incredible courage and deaths. Today is D-Day, the commemoration of D-Day. There are many Japanese American names on those crosses there, and they sustained the highest combat casualty rate of any unit of comparable size in the entire Second World War. And they came back at the end of the war as the single most decorated unit of the Second World War. They were greeted back on the White House lawn by President Harry Truman, who said to them, "You fought not only the enemy, but prejudice, and you won." So there are all these amazing stories. But there's the loyalty questionnaire fractured the Japanese American incarcerees. There were those who stood on American principles. They said, I'm an American, and I will fight for my country, but I will fight as an American. If I can report to my hometown draft board with my family back home, I'll be like any American. I'll have something to fight for. I will fight as an American. This was a gutsy stand. The whole might of the United States government, to take a stand against it. It was an American stand. And for that, they were tried for draft evasion, found guilty, and transferred from an internment camp to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. And these young men fought on another battlefield behind the tall penitentiary walls, but they stood strong as proud Americans standing on American ideals, and I honor them just as much as those that came back as heroes from European battlefields.
Thank you for telling me their story and for telling your story.
Well, my pleasure.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Permanent Record Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener supported. If you'd like to help us out, please go to patreon.com/tvdudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter at TV Dudes, and help us out on iTunes by giving us a 5-star rating and writing a review. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and permanentrcrd.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.